Welcome to the Creative Inspired Alive podcast. Our guest, Tara Mohr, is an internationally renowned coach and educator on women's leadership and well-being. She's the author of Playing Big, Practical Wisdom for Women Who Want to Speak Up, Create, and Lead, which empowers women to overcome self-doubt, to live more fully, and pursue their dreams by finding their voice and taking bold action. Along with her coaching certification, she also has an MBA from Stanford University and an undergraduate degree in English literature from Yale. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Today Show, and the Harvard Business Review. Today, we talk about playing big in our creative career, cultivating our inner mentor, unhooking from criticism and praise, promoting our art with courage, and how to tap our deepest authenticity. Creative Inspired Alive is a video podcast featuring interviews with amazing authors and leading creativity experts about the creative process, the love of their craft, and of course, their latest books. Hosted today by writer and creativity coach, Joanna Phoenix. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome, Tara. It's so nice to have you on the Creative Inspired Alive podcast. Your book, Playing Big, has motivated so many creatives that I know to really fully embrace their power. And I'm so grateful to have your wisdom and presence here today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yay. So we are a community of storytellers at Creative Inspired Alive. And so I thought a fun way to start would be for you to tell us your story. What led you to this work?
Well, as I'm sure your listeners know, there's a lot of different places to choose how do you choose where your story begins? But I grew up in a very unique environment. I say my mom was a bedroom mystic, by which I mean the lines of her bedroom were floor-to-ceiling bookshelves with spirituality and psychology books and spirituality from every religious tradition around the world. And she was really operating out of the sense that all of those traditions were speaking to the same thing. And I was raised with a lot of conversation about psychology and our inner life from a very young age, including analyzing my dreams at the breakfast table with her every morning and diagramming the Jungian archetypes on a yellow pad when I was like 5 years old. And I thought that's what all children did at the breakfast table. So I had that thread of my childhood, but I also was in a home where education was very much valued and also achievement in school was sort of expected. So I had this hybrid path that was difficult earlier in my life and sometimes it's still difficult, but a lot of times our hybrid paths, come to kind of serve us in adulthood. So I had one foot in the world of spirituality bookstores and Zen retreats and all these things growing up. And then the other foot in a much more left brain world that didn't really talk about or affirm any of those things. Then went on to, I went to college. I wanted to continue studying psychology and learn about people. But when I got to the psychology class, the intro psychology class, and I picked up my textbook at the bookstore, and I looked in the index to see where I could learn more about Jung or where I could learn more about Maslow and these great thinkers I had grown up on, and none of them were in the index of the book. And I went to my professor and I asked why. And he said, well, they weren't scientists. We don't study them in the psychology department. And then in this very condescending way, he said, well, if you want to study Jung, go to the literature department because that was literature, meaning like that was fiction. And I said, okay, I go then. I will go wherever the most complex discussions about our inner lives are. And I was also getting a sense we were going to talk a lot about lab rats and, how the lab rat proved that if you poke the lab rat isn't happy. And I was like, this is not groundbreaking. So I became an English major. I also loved writing and went deep into the study of Shakespeare, actually. And this is like a little known part of my story, but spent a lot of college working for and studying with Harold Bloom and typing his manuscripts into the computer. He's a very famous, very old school Shakespeare critic. And then I had kind of a weaving path. I got a little bit lost from my creativity in the highly critical Ivy League environment. I studied literature, but I kind of lost my own creative voice. And I also kind of fell prey to that Ivy League skepticism of all of that spirituality stuff. So, fast forward, I would say through my 20s, I kind of toggled between losing my voice and trying to pick it up again. I went to business school, and that's where I encountered the world of coaching. And I was very interested in how coaching kind of came back around again to our inner lives, but with this very forward-looking in the world non-pathology based model. And I filed that away, and a few years after business school, started pursuing coaching training. And while I was beginning to work with these very early practice clients in my first kind of practice days of coaching, I very quickly saw this pattern, which was that all of my clients were what I would consider brilliant women. They were kind and conscientious and visionary and smart, and none of them could at all see or feel their capability. And they were all pretty racked with self-doubt. And I very much recognized myself in them as well. And so I got curious, like what is going to help close the gap so that kind, creative, ethical people are stepping more into their potential, and what's happening for women at this particular moment that kind of makes it possible for us to do that in new ways, but where it's still hard to do that. And my coaching practice kind of became a laboratory to look at that, because my coaching training had not really gotten into those issues and those issues for women. And quickly, I started to see kind of what tools and concepts were most helpful for us in moving past that playing small. And I started to use those more and more. And then I started to teach them to groups. And then when those groups started to, they were just really growing and having incredible effects for people. And then it felt like time to write a book. I had always wanted to write a book. I had wanted to write a book from before I had even a course to write about in it. We could talk more about that later, but that became the Playing Big book. And so since then, my work has included a lot of working with women around the world, different ages, different industries, to help them play bigger in the ways they want to, and also has stretched into other areas of spirituality and social change work and inner transformation.
You talk a lot about callings in Playing Big, and I wondered, how did you know that this was your calling?
Well, great question. There are two big signs of a calling in my experience. And this is, what I found in my own experience, but now I get the gift of like talking to so many people about their callings. So, well, first of all, my definition of a calling is it's the assignment we receive to bring love or goodness into the world in some particular way. And it's often an individual assignment. Like we might team up with an organization or a broader group, but our part in that work tends to show up as an individual assignment that's related to our individual gifts or our soul's needs for growth and learning. And so how do we discern that assignment? And we do receive it. So we don't, unfortunately, get to choose it like at the salad bar, which one would be most convenient? Which one will my family most approve of? Which one fits in with my fears and lifestyle best? It doesn't. It's a calling, and we receive it. And it can either show up, sometimes it shows up as an idea or vision about something we want to create. And, this is classic for writers. The story just came. The character started talking to me. I have a sense of how this book, I can see it. So it can look like that, or it can look like I have a vision of the community garden I want to make at my kid's school, or the epic 50th birthday I want to throw for my sister-in-law, or the jewelry I want to make, or, the retreat center I want to create. So sometimes it comes as the idea of what we want to realize in the world.
And I love how you say those ideas can be both big and small.
100%. And they are. Yeah. And a calling can be something that lasts a month and be a project. To me, what defines it is kind of this quality of receiving it, feeling strangely assigned to it, feeling like it won't leave you alone. But sometimes the calling shows up. The second way is more in terms of a pain or frustration with some aspect of the status quo. So we might not know what we want to create, but we know of all the needs and heartbreak in the world, some particular aspect, some particular piece is speaking especially loudly to us and giving us that sense of this need has something to do with your work. And then we tend to also feel unprepared and daunted and not enough to do our callings. That's kind of a telltale sign of it. They feel usually pretty vulnerable to pursue. So for me, one of those callings has been the way that women's voices are missing, the sort of persistent noticing of that, frustration with that since childhood, since, listening to the history teacher explain whatever, the American Revolution in grade school. And I'm like, well, were there women there? Why is she not mentioning them? There must have been there. So always noticing where women's voices are missing, always feeling this intense curiosity to kind of say, how would this picture be different if women's voices were equally heard and present, and women's wisdom? So for that calling, that kind of persistent noticing and frustration. And then also feeling, now not in the book, but since the book, I often use this term, the home zone, of like, when you're in that place in yourself that kind of feels like a home, you feel a sense of flow, you feel a sense of kind of resonance. And so for me, when I work on those issues of bringing forward women's voices, I really feel in my home zone. Doesn't mean I don't also get inner critic and fear, but when I'm actually doing the thing, I have that home zone feeling. And that can be another good affirmation that something is the right calling for a time. And I do think our callings end, and that doesn't mean they weren't callings before, but they have beginnings and life cycles and endings.
I'm so surprised to kind of hear that even in your callings, it's not all green lights and confidence, that fear itself can be a sign that you're stepping into that place.
Yeah.
And you talk about two different types of fear, and I've gone back to that several times. I was wondering if you could tell our listeners.
Yeah. So the model that I have used for now, 15 or more years to think about fear that still just feels so resonant comes from a spiritual teacher named Rabbi Alan Liu. He's now passed away, but he has a beautiful textual analysis of some Old Testament texts, and he points out these two different words for fear. So these are, terms for fear that have been around for thousands of years. And the first one is pachad. And his definition of pachad is that it's the fear of projected things or imagined things. So this is what you'll sometimes hear contemporary thinkers call lizard brain fear. This, when our reptilian brain gets overreactive, it's wired to be on alert for any threat or danger. It's very instinctive and not super rational. That's our lizard brain fear or pahad fear. So this fear of projected or imagined things. And it's pretty much all the time an anticipatory fear. So that one, I think most of us are a little bit familiar with. If not consciously, we experience it in our lives. The other one we talk about less. So his second term that he points to is yira. And yira has a few definitions. It's the feeling we feel when we're occupying a larger space than we are used to inhabiting. And that could be a literal space, like I am standing on a bigger stage. I have the corner office now. It could be a literal space like that. Or it could be a metaphoric, I'm inhabiting more space. I'm taking up more space at this table. I'm reaching more people with my work. So that's the first. This is the feeling we feel when we're inhabiting a larger space than we're used to. It's also the feeling we feel when something happens that suddenly we get a lot more energy than we typically have. And then third, it's the feeling we have in the presence of the sacred. So when Moses is at the burning bush having that mysterious encounter with the divine, this is the word used to describe the kind of fear he feels. So it can sometimes be translated as like a reverence or an awe, but it is this interesting, it is a kind of fear that's imbued with maybe exhilaration, reverence, kind of transcendence of our ego self. So what in the heck does that have to do with coaching women? When I read that, I thought, I am watching people experience this all the time in our coaching sessions. And I thought of a client at the time who was working at a large bank, and in our sessions, she was really getting clear and kind of admitting to herself that she wanted to leave the bank. She wanted to move to the particular country in the developing world and wanted to do kind of full-time, do this service work that she had been squeezing in the margins around her corporate job. And it felt like a huge, bold, scary risk to her to do that, leaving a lot of her known and her sort of expected course. But when she said it in the session, there was this sort of sacred fear that was hanging in the air. And I realized that both she and I were treating that like regular old fear and kind of bringing out the regular old fear toolkit, which really wasn't right and wasn't helpful. And that basically witness them, breathe into them, welcome them, sort of tolerate the discomfort of them and not retreat from it, and get used to doing the things in our lives that bring ira.
I love the word, the feeling of like walking up to a big precipice. And there is fear in that. There is this holy presence that I love you say we need to kind of expand ourselves to be able to hold it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes there's nothing to do but breathe with it. Take that deep breath. Yeah.
Your discussions on the inner critic and the counterpart, the inner mentor, are just, I think, essential for every human, but particularly important in the creative realm.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the power of the inner critic and the salve
Yes.
of the inner mentor.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk first about what the inner critic is. So the inner critic is that voice in our heads that's saying, you're not good enough. You're not a real writer. This is clunky. You don't know what you're doing. A million other people have done this. This isn't going to be original. This is embarrassing. You know, you're not an artist. It's all that stuff around our writing. It can also be the, oh my God, your upper arms, or you're a terrible mom, or, you know, all the other areas it chatters to us about. But really, if you, a good benchmark is if you are talking to yourself in a way you would not intend to talk to a friend that you really love, you're probably hearing from your inner critic. It is universal among women. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been brought in to do an inner critic workshop, and I'm like, well, now my inner critic's speaking up, because surely like these CEO, these women CEOs, or these women who are in government, or they're not going to be suffering from this as acutely as, and they always are. They always are. So we're not alone in this. And while the traditional advice is like basically somehow become confident and affirm yourself, stand in the mirror and say, I can do it, most of us get nowhere with that. And my perspective is that the inner critic speaks up when our safety instinct, that part of us that does not care if we are fulfilled, creatively expressed, but just wants to feel comfy and like life is risk-free. It's that part of us trying to get us to retreat into a comfort zone by basically beating us up into it. And so we can't delete the safety instinct part of us. It's not excisable through surgery or any other means. We're going to have it, and we're going to have self-doubt chattering at louder or less loud frequencies at different times. And so we don't want to try and graduate from that, but we want a toolkit to quiet it and work with it again and again and again and again when it comes up. And so part of playing big is about learning that toolkit. And the first piece of that is just recognizing, oh, I'm hearing from my inner critic now, and recognizing it as the voice that it is instead of thinking of it as the voice of truth. And another big piece for me, especially over the years, has become this, and this is really, I think, important for writers, is just giving up self-assessment thoughts entirely. So it's not like try to psych yourself up to assess yourself positively, but actually shifting from I can assess myself, like this illusion that we can assess. Am I good enough to do a podcast? Well, I'm going to actually come back to it as my novel writing. Am I good enough to do a podcast? Am I a good writer? Am I talented? Those are what I'd call self-assessment questions. I cannot find any example when they are of use to anyone. And instead of assessing ourselves, we want to come from our intrinsic experience, meaning, do I want to do this? Is this fulfilling? Is this exciting? Is my novel ready? Is this piece of writing working? Has to kind of become a very neutral, creative discernment question that has nothing to do with how we're evaluating our own measuring up. So that's inner critic. And
Wait, hang on, go back.
Oh, yeah.
The difference between the inner critic being like, this chapter stinks, and this neutral assessment.
Yes.
How do we get there?
Right. It's tricky. So I think first of all, we vary in our ability to do it at all, right? So, because we've all had that experience where we've revised and edited something and definitely made it worse, and we realized that later, and we thought we were making it better at the time. So some of it is knowing, like, do I really, in this, with this creative work and who I am in this moment, do I really have what I need to discern? Like, am I feeling like I have what I need to discern how to make this better or not? And that's where sometimes, so I love Julia Cameron's idea about sort of how to know when you're working with helpful feedback or a good editor, which is basically like, does it click for you? When someone gives you a comment of like, this isn't working because, and what if you tried this? Or even just, this isn't working because, does that make you go, I knew it wasn't working and that is right. Oh, they put their finger on it. Gosh, that's so helpful. Or does it make you feel like, nah, what? And they don't get me. And do they even understand what I'm trying to do? And the thing they're proposing makes me cringe. She's saying like the right kind of feedback and editorial work, it will give you that click and it will feel like assistance. And I think that's a great criteria for outside help. So there's that, do I know right now what this piece needs? Is it speaking clearly to me about that? Do I need to look for the feedback that can help me do that?
Yeah. Was it quieting sort of this outer noise to really hear what your deeper knowing is about?
Sometimes, for sure, sometimes. But it's also, okay, so I like to use the example of like a 5-year-old girl building a fort. So she's building her fort in her house, to play. Like she's doing the thing with the couch pillows and the blankets. And she might sometimes look at it and be like, I would like this fort to have more layers of blankets on top. Or she may be like, it needs to be smaller. Oh my gosh, it needs a door. It needs all my stuffies inside. It needs a ladder, but only the neighbor has a ladder. So now I got to go recruit a team, So I would call that she's doing creative discernment. She's figuring out, I want this thing to have more of this, less of this. I want to change it in this way. She's revising her creation, but she is doing it still with a sense of joy and play. And you do not hear her saying, I knew I couldn't build a fort in the first place, or I'm not sure if I am like worthy of fort building. So she's still in the land of like craft and play and curiosity and joyful creation. So we can revise from that place, or when you start hearing underlying those desires to revise, it sucks, black and white thinking, declarations, attributions about you, looping thoughts. That's when that's not revision anymore. That's just self-flagellation with maybe a little revision thrown in.
Right. So it's like the tone of the tone of the talk. And are they seated in curiosity, joy, and play?
Yeah.
Or are they trying to break something down?
Yes.
Wonderful. And one of my favorite aspects of your book is I really get the concept of unhooking from criticism. I think you spoke to that beautifully just now. But the idea of unhooking from praise being equally as important was very powerful for me. Can you tell us about why we need to unhook from praise?
Yes. Okay. I'll start by saying Carol Dweck, who is the wonderful psychology researcher out of Stanford, when you hear growth mindset, she invented that whole thing. And it's all based on a lot of, very solid research about how praise and criticism affects motivation. And one of the things she found is that when you praise children for their innate ability, like you're so good at math, if they take a math test and you go, wow, you're so good at math, do you want to take the next harder level test? They say, no, thank you, because they don't want to disprove the praise. And that effect of all of the different populations she has looked at, that effect is the strongest in high achieving girls. And that really hit me like, oh, I recognize that. I absolutely recognize that there are, times when I would win an award and then I would immediately drop the activity, afterwards, right? Especially if it was something creative. So we have this issue of, if I get praise, it doesn't actually make me confident. And we also know this, right? High achieving girls are not confident. They're very anxious, insecure population. So I get praise. I now don't want to disprove the praise. Maybe I feel like an imposter and I fooled them to temporarily get the praise, or my talent's going to run out. Right? So that's one issue. But also, especially in our creative lives, people are going to like some stuff we do better than others. And if we're in it for the long game, the number one stakeholder we're accountable to is like the muse, is our creative inspiration. If you're not faithful to that, I don't believe the ideas and the flow will keep coming. And I don't believe you can have a very happy or successful creative life. But some things are going to happen to be more popular in the market at times than others. Some things are going to find their lucky path in the world more than others. So I always say, the ice cream sundae should be the work itself. And if praise comes, that is a sweet little cherry on top, but it has to be done in a way that it was going to be a delicious sundae for you, whether that cherry ever gets placed there or not.
How do you coach somebody to take that vision, maybe looking outwards for validation, and turn it more internally? Are there practices that one can do to help strengthen that prioritizing the muse?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I will ask people the coaching question, what is more important to you than praise? So send your brain looking for that. What is more important to you than praise? And people will immediately go, oh, joy. Oh, novelty. Oh, and then we can write those down and we can post them somewhere, and that can be a touchstone. The inner mentor, which is a huge part of Playing Big, which is basically all about, through a guided visualization, connecting with a sense of your kind of wise elder self, your sage self, who you're becoming. And we do a guided visualization so we can really get out of our everyday thinking and truly access her in this kind of imaginal space. And that's available on my website. So anyone can do that. It's also in the book.
I'll link it to the Substack.
Okay, good. Yeah. It's really powerful. So we can also, when we're looking outward, what would your inner mentor have you do here? Where would she have you be looking? What's her opinion about looking towards other people's opinions? And often when we hear something from our inner mentor, it just lands as guidance much more powerfully than if someone else just told us. So those are a couple things. But I always say, it's like I wrote a poem about creativity, and there's a phrase in there that like, you're making because it's the great romance of your life. Anything that helps us remember that and helps it be like that is really important.
I love that. In Playing Big, you call out so many hiding strategies that my younger self felt so exposed. Things like over-preparing or over-polishing. One more draft or one more degree, and then I'll be ready. And I felt the value of that. And then you talk about leaping in contrast to hiding. And the concept of a leap is a little bit surprising. It's not quite what I thought it would be. And so I wondered if you could talk about what makes a leap a leap.
Yes. And I'm also curious, when you say your younger self related, I'm like curious to hear what helped you get over those hiding strategies. Yes. So a leap in the Playing Big kind of terminology means something very specific. And it's an action that we take that is under 2 weeks, like a little mini project that gets us into our Playing Big, that brings us or our work in contact with an audience that we want to reach. And most importantly, it's an experiment we run to gather data on something that feels like an unknown related to our Playing Big. And that's really the most important part. So where we normally would think of a leap as like, did it work out or not? Did I succeed or fail? Maybe we'd think, well, my leap is going to be, I'm going to query 10 agents. And if I get a yes, it's a win. Or my leap is going to be, I'm going to start a Substack. And if people are subscribing, it's a win. But in any kind of entrepreneurial or creative endeavor like that, there are a lot of unknowns. And the early work is answering our questions about those unknowns. And the success is not that the thing that works out, because 99% of the time it doesn't early on. The success is actually the learning about what it's going to take to do this in a way that works. So success is not, I got a yes from an agent, but like I'm learning what type of agent might be more responsive or interested, or I tried, 5 different types of query letters and I'm seeing if there's any pattern in what gets more of a response. So we're figuring out, what do I not know yet that's important to find out? What's an experiment that would allow me to learn more? And then how can I do that in a pretty short learning cycle so I can then see what I've learned and then design the next experiment from that?
Yeah, that's essentially where I got to, where I was like, I can't prepare for a first time. The first time, I call it first pancakes. The first pancake is
Right.
going to be wonky. And I just need to make the first to get to the second and the third. And so I can't ever prepare enough to make a perfect first pancake. And that's not the point. So
Right.
it's
Yes, 100%.
same concept, just with a lot more breakfast metaphors.
And first pancake's a great metaphor for first drafts too.
Totally. So in the concept of the leap, the thing I loved was that a leap requires contact. So
Right.
I always thought finishing my book is a leap. But in your book, you don't label that as a leap. That leap requires contact with an audience, contact with a group of people that would enjoy your gift. And that distinction was really valuable and surprising to me.
Yeah. And setting an exciting goal to finish your manuscript or write one more chapter or any of those solo things, they can still be wonderful tasks, goals, projects. But this specific thing around leaping is really looking at getting real feedback, getting out of our solo looping that we do.
Breaking free from a holding pattern.
Yes, yes. And I will say, the leaping model is kind of designed for the entrepreneurial part of our work and the part, whatever we're doing, and the part where we need something to work with stakeholders to get done what we want to get done in the world. I don't think every stage of the creative process is the right stage for that contact with a stakeholder, right? So I'm all for incubation phases and, kind of the creative pregnancies you aren't talking about yet because it doesn't feel like time. I think that's super important too. But then when we start to talk about what title might be appealing to people or what kind of jacket copy or things that really are about the interface with the market, there we don't want to get stuck trying to guess by ourselves what will land. And
Great distinction.
Yeah. Or when we get to the point in our work where the creative thing itself has enough of its own integrity, and now we need to know, is this communicating what I want to communicate? Is it clear? Is it coming across?
It's time for contact then.
Yeah. Yeah.
At Creative Inspire Live, we aren't just a podcast, we're a community. And before each podcast, we ask community members to contribute questions. So I have one here from Haley. And she says, in writing, the advice we pre-published authors are given is, the one who makes it are the ones who don't quit. She says, so I won't quit. But is there any advice you have about the challenge of waiting to make it in the publishing world?
It's hard. And I do think persistence is key. And we have so many examples of that, right? Like the people who, the try number 87 was the yes. I guess I feel like there's a paradox or there's sort of, maybe a paradox or multiple routes in what to do there. Because I think on the one hand, sometimes we keep looking for the right home for something. And then on the other hand, there's this feedback piece of is there something for me to learn about what's maybe not landing yet or what's not resonating that I am willing to tweak or change? And how do I get that real information? And that's also where being unhooked from praise and criticism, meaning not taking it personally and not letting our inner critic get a hold of it, can be so important. Because if every rejection is devastating, we're not going to have the wherewithal to ask curious questions and find out more. But if we can stay a little bit more neutral and let the feedback just be telling us something about the other person, about the market, about what literary agents are looking for, not about, am I a good writer? Is this measuring up, right? But oh, okay, this is telling me about what they're looking for. Then I might have the calm to go, could you tell me more about, was there something in particular that didn't land? What are you looking for? And then starting to see some patterns around that, not shape-shifting to all the feedback, but filtering, are there pieces there that I do feel comfortable changing, or that I might even get excited about changing. So we don't only have to wait if there's feedback we can learn from. And then, of course, to just keep creatively working, like work on whatever's inspiring you next, too.
In one of your posts about writing, you really struck a chord with me with the statement, we must write for ourselves and ourselves alone. You also said the creative process is designed to evolve the creator. Yeah, is what it's for.
Yeah.
And I felt the truth of those statements down to my bones. And I wanted to know, how do you balance that with opinions from editors or demands for a market? A marketplace isn't buying paranormal fantasy right now, but that's what I'm called to write. How do you handle those conflicts?
Yeah, I feel like I'm still in evolution because I'm working on a new book now, and it is not the convenient sequel that the industry people in my life would like it to be. They would love it to be Playing Big 2.0. And I really want to go some very different places. And that has been surprisingly challenging for people to get on board with. So I'm very much in that question myself. But I think maybe this is a good time to talk about those 3 roles that one of your community members asked a question about, that I like to think of having clear different parts of myself and different modes, and the 3 that seem to really be most critical to the book writing process are the artist, the editor, and the agent. Those are 3 internal parts. So the artist is sensing ideas, receiving the ideas, putting words on the page, listening to the project talk about what it wants to become, all of that. The artist is up with me at 5 a.m. and we are in a very happy, creative place. The editor has to come in only subsequent. Sometimes it might be subsequent that day. Sometimes it might be subsequent 3 months later. But it's a secondary stage that is more about looking with a little bit more of an analytical and critical eye about sequence, about clarity, about word choice, about tightness. It's a more conscious, deliberate. I would say it's a little bit more agentic and less receptive. It has more left brain to it, all of that. So that's who comes for the editing. And if that part is allowed in the earlier creative stages, the editor will sort of devour the artist and scare the artist out of the room, because the artist doesn't want to evaluate each sentence after she writes it and any of that. And then the kind of even more steely part is the agent. And that's who needs to attend meetings where you're pitching your idea, and that's who's writing things in proposal speak, and that part is more adaptable to the world and is kind of more willing to be savvy about the market. And I think of those almost in concentric circles for myself. So the artist is the most tender internal part and kind of does need to be protected. So that's somehow, I think, part of the answer to that question is the inner core has to still be the writing for yourself. And then when we get to how does this get positioned and how do we talk about it and who do we sell what to, that can be, I think, where more adaptability to the market comes in, but a more tough part of ourselves kind of comes forward to handle that part.
How do you keep them separated?
To me, just thinking of them that way, and having the conscious awareness that it's okay to do my process that way makes a big difference.
Labeling them, calling them forward or back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then in terms of promotion, it can be so tricky for so many creatives. And you talk about promotion as visibility. Yes, a few other shifts that might help an artist be seen.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you had any tips for us around
that. I mean, I will just say I have never met a woman who's I am excited to self-promote. That doesn't happen. We're oh, it's cringy and how and. And so I instead to think about the term visibility and have people just think about, who do I want my work to be visible to? And if I feel this work could serve someone or entertain someone or delight someone, how would they ever find it? And kind of reverse engineer from that. And then it becomes just a kind of intentional, here's where and how I want to be visible so that people who would be served by this would be able to find it.
I use the same trick of convincing myself that visibility, making my work visible, is a service to people who want to find my work, to people who want to enjoy my words.
Yeah, you're saying I use that trick with, yeah.
So just to find my work. And so I make it less about me and more about the connection.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we're guided by service in that way, we can kind of inspire ourselves to do all kinds of things we wouldn't do out of quote unquote confidence.
In my creative life, I work really hard to drown out the noise and come back to that deeper knowing and that deeper place to create from. And I wondered if there were any practices that you recommend to kind of tap your inner authenticity as you create and write.
Yeah, I think, the best ways I know how are growing into my inner mentor in every area of my life, like continuing to ask, what would she do? How would she approach this? What would she say? That's a hugely powerful way. Really trying to do things for the inner experience of them, not the narrative about myself that they relate to. So yeah, following what feels resonant, exciting, what feels like it has vitality to it. And then also kind of the basic one of like, we know that the noise is louder when we're tired or overwhelmed or overstressed. So just really paying attention to replenishing ourselves in the most basic physical ways, because the noise does get quieter just when we have that foundation.
Yeah, taking good care of yourself. I love
Yes.
That. And then the last question, another community member wanted to know, what's next for you? What feels alive now? What books are you working on?
Thank you for asking. So I continue to teach the Playing Big course for women who want to play bigger. I teach the Playing Big facilitators training for coaches and therapists and mentors who want to help others learn that toolkit. And also the Coaching Way course, which is kind of my approach to coaching. And now I'm working on a spirituality book that is just been a really beautiful, engaging, creative process and letting me grow more in that inner mentor direction of what she wants to say.
I cannot wait to read it.
Thank you.
In the meantime, everyone, Playing Big by Tara Mohr. You can find it anywhere books are sold. And thank you so much for talking today and gifting us your wisdom and your passion. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, thank you. This was such a delight. And congratulations on your first Just Joanna podcast. You were totally in the flow and aced it.
I made a leap.
Awesome.
Want more episodes of this podcast? The full video versions are available free at creativeinspiredalive.com, a kind, vibrant online community who believe that everyone can spark creativity and build an inspired, happier life. We can't wait to see you there.